8th of June 1998 was a Monday, and it was on this day 25 years ago that General Sani Abacha died. The mainstream media verdict on Abacha in Nigeria has always been clear, but since some people on social media decide to extol Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, let me do the same for Abacha. It is perhaps an exercise in foolishness, but with small hope that foolishness may cure foolishness, in the same way that when one responds to sarcasm with equal sarcasm, the instigators sometimes get serious, except there is a fixed agenda. In other words, those who do evil ordinarily look ordinary. The popular depiction of the devil, for instance, as a horn-half animal holding a pitchfork, would scare anyone away, but he seduces many by appearing as an angel. People who rape women may have sisters whom they protect jealously. Dictators don't always appear evil. Everyone has a good or bad side, but the balance of both is what formed historical evolution afterwards. Abacha had good leadership sides, and that is what we will discuss today, to explain that dictatorship can be good in one aspect while perpetrating far worse in other aspects. Contrary to popular belief, Sani Abacha was a Kunari, not Hausa or Fulani, but he was casted as one of the latter two to promote an idea of Fulani domination. By very many accounts, Abacha was a soldier, brave, gallant, and courageous in warfare and battles. It might be fair to say of Abacha that he was not really at first a power schemer like Babangida, by the record of having participated in every successful coup since the counter coup of July 1966 until the one that brought in Babangida, but he didn't push himself too forward. By military record, Sani Abacha was the only military head of state in Nigeria who rose through every rank, never skipped even a single one on his way to becoming general as head of state. None of Nigeria's military leader can claim such a feat and is remarkable. When the Oka coup took place under IBB, Abacha was credited with quelling it after even IBB went into hiding. The plotters had stormed a guest house Abacha usually frequented, but did not find him, only for him to call his son Ibrahim to pick him up from same guest house. Armed with only a few machine guns on his laps in the front seat and with a civilian son as driver, Abacha drove to his Flagstaff House residence as Chief of Army Staff, and from there oversaw the end of the Oka coup and making a radio broadcast before IBB came out. When IBB stepped aside, same day he left Abacha behind with the interim national government of Ernest Shoneko so that he could topple the ING, but events shows that Abacha didn't do this until he was encouraged to do so by MKO Abiola clique, and even then without violence. Not only was the coup without violence, but it was the most peaceful coup ever in Nigeria's history. Some say it was not even a coup technically, because Shoneko by himself signed and announced his own resignation and even worked with Abacha subsequently on various issues. Abiola rightly felt that the ING was an illegal contraption, and based on closeness with Abacha and on the advice of some Yoruba steward, he asked Abacha to topple the ING and hand over power to him. So someone can say Abacha didn't really force himself on Nigeria in 1993. In fact, in pushing Shoneko to resign after about 3 months, some say that Abacha had told him from the beginning of the ING that if he felt too pressured with the office, he should let Abacha know and Abacha would take over from him. But others say it was the other way round, that Shoneko himself had told Abacha and other military top guns that if they ever wanted him out, there was no need to shoot or kill. They should just come privately and he would resign and hand over power to them, which was exactly how it played out, and Abacha took over. So in the exercise of foolishness, You can say Abacha had political backing to take over and didn't force himself on Nigeria ab initio. Many in the press actually celebrated his coup. To be further factually correct, as I mentioned in my former story on the saga over the last few years, Abiola even had nominees into the first Abacha's cabinet. Abacha got into power and refused to relinquish it, though, which is where the problem started, but it still wasn't the worst. As a matter of factual records again, Abacha didn't detain Abiola until Abiola declared himself president in Epetido, and by the military decree, which was the law at that time, it was illegal. Sane people know though that Abiola was the legitimately elected president. Abacha initially took popular steps like allowing some newspapers proscribed by IBB to reopen and appointing newspaper publishers like Alex Ibru into his cabinet. Let's ignore that Ibru was later shot by gunmen and left half paralyzed because it wasn't Abacha that held the gun. I honestly don't know how to be foolish in evaluating political leadership, but this is an exercise to expose foolishness in the appraisal of political leadership, so I persist. Let me point to some achievements and milestones of Abacha's 5-year tenure for Nigeria and Africa. We can say that Abacha was a supporter of democracy because he donated millions of dollars to the African National Congress for Mandela's election in 1994. Mandela was popular in South Africa, but politicking cost money, and Abacha donated for that good cause. The money wasn't small, about $50 million in one instance, and so many others. In recognition of this feat in support of a good cause, Madiba was very reluctant to criticize Abacha, even after Robert Mugabe criticized Abacha publicly. Nigeria's involvement with Liberia dates back to the period Abacha was Chief of Defense Staff, and Abacha did not relent when he became head of state, and more so after he became the chairman of ECOWAS. He intervened in favor of peace and democracy in Liberia. Hero, isn't he? In May 1997 in Sierra Leone, the Foday Sanko-led Revolutionary United Front ousted the democratically elected president Ahmed Tijan Kaba. By March of 1998, Abacha has sent troops to restore democracy in Sierra Leone and push out the junta alliance led by Johnny Koroma. Abacha was so much a Democrat that he refused to continue leading Nigeria in khaki, and by the end of his rule, he used to adorn Agbada robes to address the nation, and politicians were already begging him to contest election in the transition he had set up. All the 5 political parties adopted him eventually, although 1 or 2 like GDM were initially reluctant. Note that in all this, Abacha didn't say anything ambitious. It is politicians and activists who were calling for him to transmute from military to civilian leader. General Abacha is God-chosen leader. He is a leader endowed with perfection, not arrogant with power. If God decreed that Abacha will be president, no human rights activist can stop him. It is in the interest of our children and future generation for Abacha to continue. The quote above was from Alhaji Arishokola Alao. Here is another one by Evangelist Bamidele Olumilua. General Abacha as a human being may have his shortcomings, but he has done a lot to stabilize the country and prove that Nigeria is capable of managing her own affairs. This one is from Daniel Kanu, conveyor of the YEAA. The destiny of this nation and the transition to democracy under the present dispensation can only achieve its viable potential if handled by prudent, purposeful, and transparent leadership of General Abacha. On the 12th of October 1997, Chief Otto Eze led dozens of traditional rulers from the South-South and Southeast to beg Abacha in Aso Rock to continue in office. He boldly declared, "Anybody trying to stop Abacha is tempting God and will never succeed." What was Abacha's response to them? He humbly said, It is something that one has to think about and articulate. You see, it is not for me to answer. Can we now say that he was a Democrat since our evaluation of history can be contrarian against what is widely believed? I have deliberately skipped what Northerners said about him at the time, but so many people were actively pushing Abacha to transmute to civilian president. Some even assured that once he legitimized his power that way, America and the rest of the West would accept and embrace him. But let's move on to sports, shall we? Nigeria had arguably its finest year under Abacha rule from 1993 to 1998. From winning the African Cup of Nations in 1994 and also qualifying for her first FIFA World Cup in 1994 to the unmatched performance in the Olympics of 1996. We can declare Abacha successful in sport for Nigeria. Never mind that Nigeria was banned from the same African Cup of Nations in 1996 and 98 due to Abacha. It was Bad Belle from South Africa who forgot the millions of dollars he had helped them with in the past. But in sport, Abacha was a hero. Let's move on from sport again to one for our feminists. In terms of women empowerment, Abacha also achieved a number of things for his short 5 years. Nigeria women had a commission for women before him, but he upgraded it to a full-fledged ministry with expanded portfolio, the Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development. Who can forget Marian Abacha and her family support program, through which she built the National Hospital in Abuja, initially for women and children. If he had more years, perhaps women would have been more empowered. Kudirat Abiola, rest in peace. I can't do a research now, but I'm sure I remember that the Abacha transition produced the first ever women elected senator in Nigeria, and from a northern state too. In fact, I remember women aspired to be governors in Kano and Kaduna under Abacha, but there is more elsewhere. The Abacha regime by itself and working through the Petroleum Trust Fund built around 100 kilometers of roads across Nigeria. Of course, it favored one section above the others, but Abacha promulgated the Federal Character Commission Act, so you can call him nationalist. In terms of polity, Abacha convened the National Constitutional Conference that sat for a whole year from June 26, 1994 to June 26, 1995 to discuss Nigeria and all the problems you people have been causing since 1914. And many of the heavyweights participated in that NCC. Alex Ekweme, Sule Lamido, Ojo Madueke, Odumegwu Ojukwu, Barnabas Gamadi, Peter Odili, Maman Daura, Abba Kyari, Sam Mbakwe, Obadako Tedwosho, Shehu Yaradua, Florence Itagiwa, Tony Anini, Paul Onongo. Even Umaru Diko came back from exile for the NCC. That NCC made far-reaching recommendations for the future of Nigeria and eventually produced a constitution which, after much review, was to promulgate into law on October 1st, 1998, if only Abacha hadn't died. But most of the recommendations are in play today in our polity, because Abdul Salam Abubakar didn't convene a national conference before the transition to democracy of 1998, unlike past military leaders before election. He relied on much of what was discussed under Abacha and merged in with the 1979 constitution to guide the present republic. Prominent Yorubas boycotted the NCNC in solidarity with Abiola, but to be fair, someone like Umaru Musa Yaradua forcefully raised the matter at the NCC and was jailed by Abacha until death for his trouble. Yorubas were there, not just the mainstream political leaders of the time. It was at that NCC that a delegate, Dr. Kahir Suleiman Chafe, on the 31st of August 1994 raised the alarm that the US was planning to overthrow the Abacha regime. It wasn't only Gaddafi they wanted to kill, I guess. This one was sweetening the belly of conspiracy theories. The NCC was terribly divided on the matter of revenue allocation between the North and South, but rather than wait for the constitution to kick into effect, Abacha fixed it at 13%, which it still is today. Why is the Niger Delta not hailing Abacha today? Oh, he killed Ken Saro-Wiwa. We can take the foolishness further and say that it wasn't Abacha that convicted Saro-Wiwa. Justice Ibrahim Auta did. We can excuse every other killing under him. In fact, that he didn't pull the trigger or acted for national security. But those will be jokes. It's too morbid for me. It was at that NCC that Ekweme proposed a 4-tier system of administration: federal, zonal, state, local government area, rotational presidency, single tenure, and so much else that we apply informally today. Abacha, if he had 42 years, could have stabilized Nigeria. Maybe on state creation at the NCC, Peter Odili was appointed to lead a committee and he proposed dividing Rivers State into 3 states. Delegates cancelled him. Next was Paul Onongo, and Idomas in Benue said he was manipulating their rules to prevent their formation of Akpa State. Abacha, of Solomonic wisdom, took over directly and created 6 new states: Wampa Zone, Ebonyi in the southeast, Bayelsa in the south-south, Nasarawa in the north-central or middle belt, Zamfara in the northwest, Gombe in the northeast, and Ekiti in the southeast. Please note this: there is a Sani Abacha Street in Bayelsa. This rewriting of history by overlooking glaring facts and the climate of the time while reaching for obscure inanities and statistics is boring. And I'm truly bored. And the Abachas won't cut me a check. So let me drop some from the economy under Abacha and sum up. Abacha increased Nigerian foreign reserve from $949 million when he took over in 1993 to $9.6 billion as at 1997. Not only that, he downpaid our external debt from $36 billion in 1993 to $27 billion by 1997. Oil prices actually went higher than $15, but that was the average under Abacha. Inflation rate under IBB had been a whopping 54%, but Abacha reduced it to 8.5% as at the time he died. How did he achieve this with the economy? He was not the most brilliant man to lead Nigeria, but he worked with technocrats, especially on the economy. Former CBN Director Akpan Ekpo said even Abacha, who was a dictator, left the economy to be run by experts and the economy did well. Abacha Vision 2010 ideas follow recommendations made at the Nigeria Economic Summit of 1996, in which same year he set up a 240-person committee to draft the vision of Nigeria, primarily selected from the NESG, serious technocrats. So, maybe he could have been great. The point of this exercise of foolishness is to show that even the worst dictators have good side, especially on paper, if you ignore a lot of other factors that make up political leadership. Much of the argument currently I see ignore historical relevance in judgment. When reduced to stats, even a great footballer like Pele can be reduced to the level of Yakubu Ayebeni, ignoring the impact and influence of his goals and career in the period which he played. For hip-hop heads, at least Abacha wasn't named to Pac's rap group, which he called outlaws, and gave them names of terrible dictators worldwide, including Gaddafi, Idi Amin, Mussolini, Napoleon Bonaparte, etc. He didn't include Abacha. I guess that counts for something in foolishness. To sum it up from where I started, expecting terrible dictators to be entirely negative and evil is why some fall for devils disguised in the semblance of angels. They all had good side on paper, but were historically bad in the eyes of their citizens who rejoice when they die. Even that point about rejoicing can be countered that those in Kano didn't rejoice in the same numbers as those in Lagos. For example, because Abacha had grew up there. These things are knowns but must be gauged and assessed with proper and solid ideological orientation. And oh, Abacha had 7 sons and 3 daughters like the biblical Job. That could have been a prophetic sign for Nigeria. You know something foolish can always be invented to justify support or approval for woeful political leadership. Thank you for following up on this edition of Motherland. Do well to like and subscribe.